Hey guys, I had a previous video where I went through and I showed you guys the different aftermarket parts on my Vulcan 750. I showed you a little bit of the performance parts that I put on. I had pod filters and I had this aftermarket exhaust. And a lot of the questions were, what jetting are you using, and so on and so forth. So I've been doing a lot of tuning to this Vulcan the past couple days, and a lot of experimentation. And so I thought I would share that with you guys. So this video is going to be a little long. It's going to explain everything that I've been through on this, and hopefully you guys will have a clearer understanding of what's going on here. But also I'm hoping that you guys, maybe if you understand something a little better than I do, that you can let me know that in the comments. So thank you very much for your time, and let's get to it. So let's start with some of the different things that I've got on this. I've been experimenting with two different intakes for one. Okay, this looks stock to you guys, but it's not stock. I'm going to explain it to you here real quick. So what I've done is I have two options for intakes. I've used the stock carb boots, and then I'll take a velocity stack that I have cut short, and I will put them in here, but not too far because I don't want to block the airflow in there. So I'll put it just in there to get a good seal on it, and then I tighten this down, and that seals it really well. Performance wise, it flows a little less than the pod filters, but I only really notice it at wide open throttle. And I haven't had any dyno results, so I really don't. I couldn't tell you, statistically whether it makes more horsepower with the pod filters or not, but I really like this design setup because it kind of seals those CV carbs and gets them acting a little bit better, in my opinion. And you don't have to worry about wind blowing and things that can kind of make it not act right. So I'm going to show you the tunes for the two different intakes on here, and make sure you watch all the way to the end because I'm going to show you guys on paper the two separate tunes, so you guys don't get confused. On these carb boots, the velocity stacks stick up kind of high. It's really hard to show you guys underneath this tank just how high it is up in the gas tank. But it's high enough that I feel like it is kind of choking off a little bit of airflow to the front cylinder. So what I've done to remedy that issue is I've put mini washers on the underside of this tank, and have secured it like that. And that may seem ghetto, but it has worked for me. Honestly, a lot of this seems a little ghetto, but it works, and I've had a lot of fun with it. The problem that I was initially having, I'd be going 50, 55 miles an hour, and I'd be in top gear, and all of a sudden I would have like a quarter throttle, if that, and my fuel mixture would be leaning out. And so I put O2 sensors on. I was like, I don't want to risk running lean on this thing. And so I didn't want to risk it. I put O2 sensors on. I put air fuel mixture gauge up there. I monitor one at a time. That has worked pretty well so far. And it was showing me that I was running lean. And so I moved the needle up, several spaces, and put tons of these shims on there. And it still was not richening up. So I'm going to take this apart, and I'm going to show you guys what I have done to resolve that issue. So far I have only taken the tank off, and I have done the ear shave obviously, and removed the airbox, which makes tuning this so much easier. Just to be able to get down into the needles and adjust the needles is so much easier. This tube here that comes off the carburetor is a very critical tube. It basically keeps the pressure in the float bowls atmospheric. And so let's say you have this tube facing this way towards the front of the bike. You're going down the road and wind is getting in there. That increases the pressure in the float bowl. It's not going to flow fuel properly. You'll have a lot of tuning issues if you don't get this right. What I've done is I've pointed it towards the rear. It's under the tank, and it does really well there. In stock form, it comes over here, attaches to the airbox, and is housed that way. No air gets in there, but it also needs to be able to free flow to keep the pressure atmospheric. So that's how I have it set up. I did have it tied over here at one point. It worked pretty well there, but I decided to experiment with it, put it there, and it has worked very well so far. So you can play around with that, especially if you're having issues with it sputtering or things like that. You can play with that and see if that'll help your situation any. Alright, so here we are. I have taken the lid off of the carburetor. I pulled the vacuum slide and the needle, and I have it over here on the work table. And so here's the deal. I was having an issue with it leaning out in stock form, and it was leaning out in cruise, but I hadn't done any real modifications to the slide or anything like that. And I was really hesitant to drill a hole in my slide at first, okay? And reason being is because I don't like to mess with things in their stock form. I don't like to drill holes. I don't like to do that. I'm sure you guys don't either. They say that you can plug this hole if all else fails with RTV or some kind of plug to plug that hole up, and it'll go right back to its stock form. I still thought that was sketchy. I didn't want to do it, but as soon as I got the O2 sensors on and saw how bad it was leaning out and knew that that was dangerous for the engine, I knew I had to do something about it. So I was willing to try anything and everything. So my kit that came from my jet kit that came from Six Sigma gave me instructions on how to drill the hole in the slide. I decided to go ahead and do it. They said that if you had, like I said, drivability issues on low RPMs, that you could just fill in that hole, but I haven't had any. It fixed my problem. It enriched the mixture so much so that before I had the hole in the slide, I had about probably twice as many washers on here on this needle, and it was still super lean. And so after I drilled the slide hole, I had to drop three or so washers off of this. It will be different for wherever you are. It depends on elevation, all of that. And so you really want to do your research on how many needles or how many washers to put on your needles and things like that. But another thing that needs to be mentioned is that the hole that I drilled in the slide, the drill that came with the kit is a 1mm drill bit, but it's super tiny, and it broke about halfway through drilling one of them. So I made kind of a decision to go ahead and up the size of the hole because I didn't have another 1mm. I had a 1.5mm, which is quite the difference, but I couldn't tell you the difference because I haven't experienced it You know, I haven't experienced the tune with the 1mm drill bit, but the tune with the bigger one doesn't seem to suffer. I haven't noticed any ill effects, but um, I thought I'd mention it to you guys just in case you had any questions. The hole drilled in the slide is an absolute must. And as you see, I've drilled my hole in a very specific place. If I can get this thing to focus, that would be great. There we go. I've drilled it in a very specific place, okay? It's off to the side, but it's also, you can see in here, that it goes all the way through. It must go all the way through. If you drill it too far, you know, out, don't get it in the right place, it won't act right. But the other thing is on this, you have to make sure that it's in an opening, okay? This is toothed, so it goes in only one way into the vacuum slide. But you can see that my holes are visible, okay? And that's where you need it. You need to place that in the path that it is open and air can flow through it, or it will not act right. The other thing I did was I clipped a couple off the spring. You can start with one and see where you go from there and make a decision based off that, but I did a couple and left it there, and the slide raises quite nicely now. So that is where I'm at on the slide. I believe that it's an absolute must in order to get the slide to raise to the proper portions to allow fuel to get into the cylinders when you are at a quarter throttle or so at cruising speeds. Now, jetting, as far as jetting goes, for a long time I went with the jetting size that came in the kit, which was very rich. I think it went up like 2 or 3 sizes from the stock, which was 32 stock form. And so I went ahead and did that, and the bike was super rich. I would turn the idle screws all the way in, and it just wouldn't lean it out enough. So I talked to my bike shop, and I was, you know, explaining my condition, and he's you know, tells me a story about how, you know, he's been able to run bigger motors on smaller jets, you know, and how it just doesn't need that much fuel on the idle circuit. So he suggested go back to the stock form, and so I went down a size. I didn't quite trust him, so I went down just one size, and that was still just a little too rich. So I went back to stock. I have the stock idle jet on this Vulcan, and I can get it with my air fuel. I run it at about 13-1, just a little bit richer so that it'll start up real nice, but not so rich that it's gonna cause problems. And you can make it as rich as you want. It's not, you know, that idle jet is not lacking at all in stock form. So that's my take on that. It may be different, you know, at sea level, I don't know, but it was not a problem for me. So on the main jet, the Six Sigma jet kit came with 2 sizes of mains, and one was a 147 or 148 and a 142. I went with the smaller one, and so far it has been good. But I'm gonna take you guys for a ride along. You'll be able to see my air fuel the whole time, and you can determine that for yourself whether you need the bigger jet or the smaller jet. But right now it's running pretty well on a 140. And remember that the only time it's using the full potential of this main jet is when it's in wide open throttle. It's all about your what you think your bike needs, and also what your bike requires. You know, depending on where you live. You know, your engine will run differently in different conditions. So you got to make that determination. A lot of guys have gotten away with tuning these things by ear over the years, but I just didn't feel right making a video about this unless I had some real data to give you guys. And so that is why I have made this video, is to show you the air fuel ratio, and let you guys make that determination for yourself.